Hello, welcome back to EPG. I'm, of course, Greg, your host. It is spooky season in the United States, so usually leading up to Halloween, things get a little bit more spooky, so decorative, pumpkins and the ghosts and everything. So I figured that the next couple episodes will feature a few things to commemorate spooky season. So one of the things that comes to mind for this episode is my own personal horror movie that I experienced when I was traveling. So back in 2018, I decided that I was going to take a little road trip, and I was going to visit the 6 states in the middle of the country that I had never visited before. I've been to all other states, but these 6 I had not visited, and those were Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming. So I allotted 5 days to do it, but I was really, I was hauling, so I would drive a lot, so like 15 hours a day, and at the end of it, I would accumulate about 3,400 miles in a 4-day period. But I managed to see everything I wanted to see. I stopped in a couple places in South Dakota, a few places in North Dakota, especially Nebraska and Kansas and Montana. And the last trip, because I was going in a loop, I was coming into Wyoming, and actually the horror story kind of started the night before. So I was just coming out of Jackson Hole, and the only hotel that was available was about 2 hours away from Jackson Hole, coming down a mountain. So there was altitude sickness. I was feeling headachy. And I ended up at a place that reminded me a lot of the Bates Motel. There was a lot of taxidermied animals around, especially in my room. There was a locked door from the inside to hopefully I think a closet or something, or storage area. So needless to say, I was very happy to have my personal safety device very close by. But anyway, nothing happened. That night, I slept very soundly, and then I got up the next day, and I drove. I needed to get back to Wichita, Kansas, and so in order to do that, I needed to drive through Wyoming and then down through Nebraska and then into Kansas. So the horror story began on my drive into western Nebraska. And to give you an idea of what western Nebraska is like, it is very empty. Even towns are empty. So as soon as I kind of crossed the border into western Nebraska, that's when the sun went down. So it was already dark. So I was driving along these roads through ghost towns, or at least mostly ghost towns, because I would drive through and then there would be one light on in this town and some house. Everything else was all dark. Every other house was dark. Every other business was dark. So I had no idea what was going on. There were no street lights. There was just one light in one building in an entire town of 50 buildings. So the other thing about it too is that there's a lot of space between these towns in western Nebraska, 60 miles in some cases, and the rest is just open prairie or fields or farmland. And so I was driving in between one of these towns. Again, it's about, I want to say 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night. And all of a sudden, my radio turns on. I didn't turn it on. It just kind of flipped on. And it got to the song Excitable Boy by Warren Zevon. And this is the first time I heard it. So it starts out kind of poppy, and then just oh, yeah, this is an interesting song. And then it gets darker and darker and darker. And I will, give you a link so that you can listen to it. So that kind of popped up out of nowhere. And again, I'm driving through the middle of western Nebraska. It is starting to get a little eerie, starting to get a little creepy. But then it really takes a big creepy turn because I noticed that my gas gauge went from half tank to riding on fumes, kind of like that. It just went, and I'm like, oh no. So I look, I have my iPhone with me, and I was looking at directions to find out the closest gas station, and it said the closest gas station was about, 70 miles away. So I'm like, oh, that's really not good. So anyway, I'm putting along, kind of saying little prayers under my breath that I make it to get a gas station because it's in the middle of the night. Cell phone reception isn't that good. I'm in the middle of nowhere. Still, with my personal safety device. at the ready, just in case. And so I'm driving, and all of a sudden somebody pulls off from a back road and comes up right behind me, riding my bumper, putting on their brights, blinding me. They keep following for like a good 5 miles, and then they turn off the lights completely, and then just pull back. And they start, slowing down, and they're at the kind of like far end, and then all of a sudden they do it again. They throw on the brights, and they drive all the way up to my bumper. And they're there for like a good 5 miles, 6 miles, and then they cut off the lights, and then they back up, and then they kind of wait, and then they do it again, and they do this 3 or 4 more times. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what is going to happen to this person? What is going to happen to them if they hit my bumper? If I need to pull over? I mean, what am I going to do? Remember. So this happens like maybe 5 or 6 more times, and then all of a sudden, like, I don't know, just the Emerald City in the Wizard of Oz just pops up out of nowhere, and it's a gas station. And as soon as the lights hit me and the person behind me, the person behind me slams on their brake, does a Dukes of Hazzard U-turn, turns around, and starts jetting the other way. So I'm like, okay, that was really weird. So anyway, I fill up my tank of gas, and then I peel out, and I get back on the road, and I start driving as fast as I can to the next town because there are no cops anywhere. So I'm driving, and then right when I get to about the state border with Kansas, I need to pull over again because I need to use the facilities. So I'm standing there in a bathroom at a urinal in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska. And all of a sudden, I hear some really heavy breathing behind me. And I have my personal safety device on me, so I put my hand on it, and I start turning around, and I see out of the corner of my eye, the best thing I can describe is a mutant. It is a man standing behind me, pockmarked face, he's got a blue mohawk, and his nose is pierced, but not like one of these. The bridge is pierced. So from here, like what a tongue stud would look like, kind of like a bar, but it's through the bridge of this guy's nose. And he is definitely high on something. Meth, PCP, I don't know. But he's just there, and he's breathing, and he's just looking ahead. He doesn't even see me, but, he's like right behind me, staring right ahead. And so as I'm like this, I'm just like, hey, you mind giving me some space? He's like, oh, yeah, sorry. Then he just kind of like melts up against the wall and just like, he's in his own universe. And I must have been the voice of God that, kind of just rang through. So anyway, I finish my business and I GTFO out of the gas station, hop in my car, and then I drive across the border into Kansas. And the first hotel I find, that is where I stay that night. So I want to say that this was probably one of the most disturbing travel incidents that I have had, where I definitely thought that my life was in danger, especially on the road with whatever that person or thing was that was following me, doing all that weird stuff. But I just want to say that I'm very glad that I had the foresight to, again, have my personal safety device. And yeah, definitely make sure that if you decide to do a road trip in western Nebraska, that you either bring an exorcist with you, or just make sure that your tank is full of gas at every possible opportunity. So on that note, thank you very much for your time, and get out there.